Hello dear viewers of my channel. For those who have seen the past parts, timecode for the new part 1 will leave in the description. I want to thank you all for your support in the comments and likes that you put. And also separately I want to thank this guy who supported my channel not only with words, but also bought a subscription. I'm really pleased. This is the first person who bought a subscription on my channel. Really thank you, friend. Anyway, I hope everyone enjoys the new video. Have a good time watching it. The men with smiles on their faces greeted Lloyd, after which the protagonist asked what they were doing, and they assumed that the guy arrived because of the wedding. While the demon girl was looking at the men intently, amazed that they didn't notice her, then one of the men looked directly at the girl without showing any emotion. This scared the little demon, and she started to hide from the man, who looked towards the demon queen, who also didn't know what to expect from the man, which was saddening. The man assumed that the girls are demons because he saw their horns. The demon queen said that the speculations of the man were true, while the little girl closed her eyes in horror, expecting hatred in her direction, while the man without any emotion looked at them and without averting his gaze indifferently said that he understood. After the men silently left the boys and began to talk on their own subjects, the voices of the people were heard around the settlement, who were very glad at the return of their lord. The old man asked the girl where she was from, and she told him where she had come from. The old man was surprised, for it was the first time he had seen a small demon. While the children were also surprised to see a new child in the settlement, the girl was instantly frightened, while the boy wondered if the demon knew what soccer was, and his friend said that Lloyd had taught them this game and it was a lot of fun. The girl asked Lloyd if they could play together with her companion, but he said it wasn't his place to ask. The boys started asking the little girl if she wanted to play with them, while the little demon didn't know what to say and was very nervous. Then she said she had an ugly skin color, suggesting that she had no right to play with people. The little girl looked at the demon with an incomprehensible look, then began to shout that the demon would not show off, because they have many like her and they are everywhere, then asked if the girl would play with them, which in turn surprised her very much. She immediately looked at the queen, trying to see if she could play with other people. While the queen smiled very softly at the little girl, she held the little girl's hand and let her go as a sign that she could really go out with people. The little girl instantly ran with her new friends, and she seemed really happy. The main character said that he wasn't completely sure that everything would be okay, while the girl took on a completely different appearance, and then hit the ball with all her might, causing it to fly through the children at great speed, and instantly breaking a huge tower. The girl was instantly frightened because she thought that she had done a very bad thing, and now she will definitely be hated, while her new friend said that she is now the head of their team and said that it was incredibly cool, which was supported by the boy saying that the girl was incredibly strong. The demon girl was incredibly happy about this attitude. It was the first time people treated her so well. While the demon queen got down on her knee, then began to beg the protagonist to lead their clan, and said that he was the new demon king, which caused only misunderstanding from Lloyd, as suddenly the body of the demon queen began to glow aura, which caused incredibly strong gusts of wind. After that the aura began to flow into the body of the protagonist. It turned out that the girl changed his title of Demon King, which was notified by the system, which caused even more misunderstanding Lloyd. After that his aura began to go out, creating an incredibly strong flow. The protagonist got huge horns and also demonic wings. The system notified that Lloyd got the skill, and now anyone with one glance will realize that he is a Demon King, and that's all the title gave him. Lloyd stood silently in place while Xavier watched intently. Xavier told Lloyd not to worry because he was no different now than he had been to them before, while the humans were not really surprised and thought that Lloyd had been a Demon King from the beginning. Lloyd was very sad that everyone saw him as a true Demon King. The protagonist started to say that he was not worthy of such a title, while the girl said that power comes from dignity and not from strength. The protagonist began to rejoice a little, because demons are obliged to follow the orders of the Demon King, even if they are impossible. At that time the human girl and ogre couple were getting married. All the humans were incredibly happy for this marriage, while Xavier was surprised that the hero could hide his horns, while the couple was just happy for this unforgettable moment. The protagonist thought about what happened in the novel compared to what is happening now, because in the novel they all became slaves, but now they are truly happy. Lloyd decided to deal with the problems as soon as possible, and Xavier supported him in this, and then they flew at great speed on the dragon. After hearing the girl's story, the demons decided to go to a new place. While in the basement of the Demon King there was an artifact that created a barrier. The girl touched the artifact, while outside there was an incredibly strong wind, which in an instant subsided. The girl gave the artifact to the protagonist, saying that he would be able to create cold air wherever he wanted. Lloyd was incredibly happy about such a thing, because he knew exactly where it could be used. At that time it was snowing on top of the mountain and the protagonist along with the demons were walking and Lloyd ordered everyone to listen to his words carefully. Everyone started to wait for the motivational speech looking at their savior while Lloyd made a crazy face saying that now they will all build a railroad right to his territory from this place. All the demons didn't change their facial expressions. They didn't seem to realize the hell they were going through. While Lloyd himself was incredibly happy because demons don't need much rest and food, and have great strength, the protagonist with his demonic face was anticipating how he could use demons for his new projects. At that time one of the demons was surprised, and reminded the girl that she had said that Lloyd was a good man, and she just silently poured her sweat. She simply said that Lloyd was the Demon King after all. It was at this moment that the construction of a huge railroad involving as many as 3,000 demons begins. The main character thought that he wanted to freeze time as soon as possible and start construction, but he also thought that before that he needed to build a huge village, and all the food supplies should also be produced in this village, after which the main character began to go out to his new subjects, and immediately did incredibly. He had a gray face and said only one word, namely to change his appearance, after which he continued to stand without any changes, but literally after a few moments his eyes began to turn reddish. And after the transformation completely took place, he introduced himself as Lloyd, the Demon Lord. The aura began to surround the main character's body. In fact, Lloyd was thinking about how cool his new look was. Xavier's voice was heard, who turned to the hero. He confessed that it was very embarrassing for him to observe the behavior of the main character. Lloyd began to say that his words definitely sounded confident and majestic, and said that the Queen would definitely agree, while she sheepishly supported Xavier's words. Lloyd silently clenched his teeth, after which he began to shout that the demons would listen attentively to him. Everyone silently looked in Lloyd's direction, but he did not understand why they were silent, because he has horns and krill, as well as the status of the Demon King. All the demons began to pretend that it was cool. The main character was surprised at how much the demons turned out to be disobedient, after which he said that he would not do this anymore. The girl began to talk about how in ancient times only the strongest could become the king of demons, and the girl also said that now they have a rule that power should be fair. She also said that everyone would obey Lloyd, but the atmosphere would still be tense. The main character understood perfectly well that with such an attitude, demons would have poor effectiveness, and thought that he needed to show himself in front of these demons. The main character asked if they would listen to him if he defeated their strongest representative, and the girl said that they were forbidden to fight among themselves. The girl also said that there is a duel that can be organized. She began to tell Lloyd, who was listening attentively, that everything was important in this duel, after which she began to talk about what was important here. Vision, speed, and reaction, after which she stated with an incredibly serious look that the competition was called rock, paper, scissors. The main character didn't seem to realize these words because his face didn't change, after which his gaze went blank because it was just a game from his home world. The main character began to say that if it allows him to convince others, then he agrees. The main character started shouting that the demons should be grateful that they could participate in the construction, after which he made a serious expression on his face and said that if he could win the duel, the demons would immediately get to work. Lloyd said that the strongest demon would come forward, after which one of the demons began to come out of the crowd. He was completely confident in himself and said that he was ready for battle. The main character was also filled with confidence that he would be able to win. All the demons started shouting the name of the game and slamming their instruments on the ground. It was under the huge support of the demons that the two opponents, namely Lloyd and his opponent, found themselves in the middle of the circle. The girl was crying because she thought the main character was a good person, and asked to stop it, and the woman said that this was a sacred duel and they had no right to interfere. While the guys got ready to start, the crowd cheered and loved the show. Xavier asked what kind of unusual duel it was, while the girl said that first you need to understand a simple concept. She began to talk about how a stone is a hammer that shakes the earth, scissors are a guillotine that cuts the heavens, but paper, according to her, is just a rag. She told about what and how the other wins, after which she began to talk about how after the signal, the warriors begin to choose two weapons, after which, after another signal, they remove one out of hand, and as a result, there remains one weapon that is compared with each other. Xavier realized that thanks to this method, it was possible to find out who was stronger, While both warriors were swordsmen in a duel, Xavier believed that they were able to easily predict any action of their opponent. He was worried about Lloyd. While the Queen shouted for the guys to get ready, Lloyd got ready to start. His opponent was also seriously preparing to start, after which Xavier, watching the duel, was greatly amazed at something. It turned out that in Xavier's opinion both chose scissors. While the hero was already moving, Xavier did not understand why the guys had a draw. While Lloyd made an incredible face, he made a creepy face and screamed, which made the demon close his eyes and change the position of his hands. All the demons were horrified by what they saw. Even the adults were shocked by the picture that appeared before their eyes. The main character's opponent turned out to be with 2 papers in his hands, while the main character was with 2 scissors in his hands, after which Lloyd eagerly asked what kind of weapon the demon would choose. At that time, silence arose between them. The earlier chanting crowd was simply silent, and the opponent of the main character fell to his knees. Xavier closely watched what happened. He instantly changed his face because what Lloyd did was just a deception. The Queen started talking about how Lloyd turned out to be a legend who could win even before the game started, which simply amazed Xavier. While the opponent began to address the demons, after which all the demons bowed their heads to the new demon king, who instantly took on a demonic appearance and spread his wings. Lloyd said that in the name of the true demon lord, they should learn how to cut down mountains in terraces. Xavier grimaced again because he asked the main character not to do that anymore. Some time later, Lloyd's dragon was moving at great speed, and together with the Queen, they headed somewhere. Lloyd thought about what the Queen of Men had told him, namely that all the cases he was involved in were starting to return to their original point. The main character thought that the phenomenon began to act much faster, and he could not even imagine what the future might be. He was worried that the Queen might fall into darkness, although he knew that so far there were no signs. The main character was worried about all the people of his territory, because while he was building a settlement, he could not freeze time, which was why he silently reflected, after which a smile appeared on his face. After all, in fact, he found a way to save all people from misfortune. The guy smiled and looked in the direction of the Queen, because he knew that she was able to predict the future, and he called her ability a weather forecast, which would greatly help in saving people. The dragon arrived at the main character's estate, where Lloyd told his parents about the girl who used to be the demon queen. Lloyd's parents began to praise the girl's appearance, while she was surprised that people were not surprised at all after Lloyd's words. Lloyd announced that he was trying to deal with the phenomenon of restoring fate as soon as possible, because if they didn't make it, then everything would be over. He also announced that now the girl will check the fate of people on a daily basis. The main character began to move from the side of the building, shouting that it was time to start. Lloyd decided to take veteran engineers with him so that they could control the demons correctly, after which he also took 2 people with him to solve technical issues, and finally he took the strongest orcs so that they could help with their strength. One of the orcs also wanted to go, but the main character forbade. After all, he is a newlywed man and should enjoy his marriage. Some time later, one of the demons started screaming with all his might and swung a shovel, after which Lloyd watched the picture of how the work of these demons showed simply insane efficiency. He believed that thanks to the demons, the construction of the settlement would be very fast. The main character started shouting that this was the power of the demons, which continued to confuse both Xavier and the other demons. The main character, along with Xavier, flew on Lloyd's pet. Lloyd completely completed the route plan with the help of his ability, and was going to start construction very soon and freeze time. At that time, on the main character's land in his estate, the girl told the main character's parents to sit while she looked at them carefully and not blink. There was an awkward pause, after which the Queen continued to look at Lloyd's parents, when suddenly her body began to shake and tears began to appear in her eyes. The man looked at the girl without realizing what was happening. While she was barely restraining herself from blinking, suddenly the man made a serious face, after which the Queen came to her senses and seemed to begin to be embarrassed. This amazed the parents of the main character, because they were worried that something terrible might happen, after which the Queen confessed and said that the couple got along very well with each other, barely able to contain her embarrassment. Such words instantly confused Lloyd's parents, after which the following people also began to enter the Queen's office. She also began to stare intently to look at them, as suddenly she was embarrassed again and confessed that they were also just in a great relationship. The couple was also embarrassed by such words. At that time, the main character announced that everyone had done a great job, and announced that the construction of the settlement had been completed. The main character began to talk about how even though they were all different, they all worked together for a common goal and a better future for everyone. Lloyd also said that they had to work without elves, because they could not destroy nature, after which Lloyd announced that now everything would start for real, which caused enthusiastic shouts from all the people. The main character said that he would go check the route and that time would freeze soon. Xavier began to worry that Lloyd was leaving alone. Lloyd proudly called himself a master of the sword and said that no monsters could harm him. At that time, the dragon flew up to the main character, after which, having received a letter, the main character ordered the dragon to go and help others in construction. The letter said that the girl was checking the safety of all residents, as well as the fact that they had taught the residents of the Loida settlement agriculture, and that they were able to become friends. The queen also said that the children were incredibly happy to be able to see the vast world, and she also said that it was all thanks to Lloyd, and the hero also read that she wished him good luck in construction. The system notified Lloyd that he had received 100 points. Lloyd was smiling. He was pleased with his result. After that, the guy instantly used the time freezing ability, which cost him as much as 3,000 points. Time froze around this place while the protagonist's heart felt terribly cold again, which made Lloyd feel very sick. It was snowing terribly heavily on the mountain, and the protagonist was lying on the ground, and he seemed to feel terrible. He thought he needed to hurry because he was getting worse. The Heart of Cold asked for forgiveness from the main character, who said that only by freezing time could he resist the restoration of fate. The guy was smiling and saying that everything was fine and that there was nothing wrong with it. The main character did not understand why the snowstorm became stronger, because time was frozen. The main character could not move normally because of his heart. He wanted to call Xavier for help. Suddenly Lloyd could not seem to say a word. He slowly began to lose consciousness, thinking that it would be hard for him without Xavier. Lloyd's eyes, they closed as it became incredibly difficult for him to cope with the desire to sleep, as the silhouette of the Queen of People suddenly appeared, moving along the snowy mountain. She also felt the terrible cold, but continued her movement with a confident expression on her face. The storm was raging outside while Lloyd's pet was incredibly angry. He was shaking and seemed to be trying to do something, but he couldn't, and Xavier said that it was impossible to create something in this weather. While Xavier looked the other way and seemed to sense something, he felt that since the time freeze, the main character's mana had become unstable and he was probably in a bad state. Xavier thought that he would have loved to go straight to Lloyd, but a little while earlier he had heard the voice of the Queen, who did not understand what this strange dome was and why she could not get out of it. Xavier reported to the Queen that the time outside the dome was now stopped, and she instantly assumed it was Lloyd's doing, and Xavier confirmed this information. She immediately asked how to get out of the place, and Xavier told her that it was impossible, because the time freeze would not be lifted for a year. Xavier said that time would not change outside and it could be a short vacation for the Queen. She began to complain that Lloyd was now going to be Demon King, while the demons working in the background looked at the human Queen, and she immediately turned around, not understanding what was going on. Xavier asked if she wanted to know how this could have happened, but she wanted to ask Lloyd directly and asked where he was. He told her that Lloyd was on the mountain, while the Queen was worried that the snowfall was getting worse and decided to go to Lloyd personally. Xavier sensed that the Queen was looking for Lloyd, which brought a smile to his face, and he decided not to disturb the Queen. Lloyd suddenly opened his eyes and didn't understand what was happening. He was lying on a warm hide covered with a blanket. He looked around and realized he was in a cave. Lloyd didn't understand what kind of clothes he was wearing. They didn't have any. Lloyd turned to Xavier but saw the Queen, who was half naked and shivering from the cold. She had given all her warm clothes to Lloyd. The Queen lay sleeping and seemed to be trying to ignore the cold she felt. Lloyd didn't understand what was happening and just kept looking in the direction of the girl. A heavy snowstorm continued outside, while Lloyd carefully tried to cover the Queen with a blanket so as not to wake her up. Lloyd immediately began to run away, because he did not want to become the Queen's debtor, because then he would have to work again. Suddenly, while running, his heart began to ache again, and then he fell to his knees, feeling a terrible pain and coldness inside his body. The Queen's voice was heard and she assumed that Lloyd's condition was getting worse. She asked the guy to come closer to her. Lloyd instantly fell on his knees in greeting to the Queen, and she asked him to stop this farce and just come closer to her. The lad slowly began to approach without raising his head, whereupon she ordered him to do it faster and Lloyd sped up. The girl changed her pose and then pointed her hand to her knees and ordered Lloyd to lie down on them. Lloyd started to look at the girl without understanding anything and then just lay down on the ground, and she wondered if he was mocking her, while the guy just obeyed the order to lie down. The queen started pointing to her leg again, telling the guy to put his head there. Lloyd didn't realize what was happening now, and a moment later he just broke down. It seemed like all reason in his head had collapsed. The queen got angry and grabbed Lloyd's head, paralleling her screaming, then forcefully placed Lloyd on her lap. She started touching the guy in the area of his heart, after which the queen's mana began to penetrate the main character's body. He was surprised that the queen could do such a thing with her mana. The queen confessed that she had learned this technique by watching Lloyd and Xavier, while Lloyd marveled at the girl's talent, because she had learned this technique alone. The queen's mana enveloped the heart of the protagonist, and she asked how he was feeling, to which Lloyd replied that he was feeling a little better. The queen was happy that the guy was feeling better, and she started to smile. Suddenly Lloyd started to get embarrassed looking straight into the eyes of such a nice girl. He instantly started to run away from her lap out of embarrassment, while the queen again grabbed the guy's head and put him on her lap and ordered him to lie still. She began to talk about the need to rest once in a while Lloyd was embarrassed to think that he was simply uncomfortable. Lloyd asked how the queen had come to be in this place, and she confessed that she just wanted to see the protagonist. Lloyd started talking about how he always does the errands he's given, saying that even a snowfall wouldn't hurt him. The queen directly asked if the guy really doesn't understand, or if he's just pretending, and Lloyd seemed to break down again, because this is the first time he's had something like this in his life, and he just doesn't know what to do. She began to say that the guy is smart, but the direct offer of marriage from a girl does not take seriously. Lloyd did not understand what was happening now. His head could not work properly. Suddenly in his head there was an image of how the queen offered Lloyd to marry. Then the guy's face turned completely red, his eyes began to twitch because he thought that the queen just wanted to load him with work, but it was not so. Suddenly the cave they were in began to shake. The queen assumed it was an earthquake. The protagonist began to realize that all the factors that were happening were proving that right now someone was trying to stop them. Lloyd started to get angry, saying that someone was trying to stop him, but the queen was not surprised by the guy's ingenuity. She thought he was a real genius. Lloyd made a mad face, then promised to make all those involved pay. The queen turned away when she saw his face, thinking that Lloyd's face really should have been changed. Outside, the snow continued to fall with great force, while something began to form in the air. A huge amount of wind began to form a cone from which a strange old man appeared. His name was Fantarasa, and he was the king of the spirits of the mountain range. He thought about the fact that in order to protect this place he had created conditions under which people could not survive in this place. He thought about how when the demons came to this land in ancient times, the spirit didn't care much. He told how their dragon guardian created a separate space where they all lived together. But the spirit's face changed as he remembered what happened then. He remembered the main character and Xavier, who in his memories looked like real villains. He thought about how these men had taken the demons and later brought more men. Lloyd had ordered Xavier to fix a precipitous piece of land, and then Xavier had attacked the place his master had mentioned with all his might, causing an incredibly powerful explosion, and the Spirit King remembered the two demons smiling at the flames they had caused. The spirit thought these people were truly insane and was incredibly angry. He thought about how people were cutting down trees without the slightest compassion. He thought that all these creatures were cursed demons who wanted to destroy the spirit's home. He watched the queen go after Lloyd, while thinking that he was going to banish these cursed creatures from his home. The spirit instantly intensified the ice storm. This instantly caused the work to stop, for the blizzard was no joke. The spirit began to shout that it was useless, because with such weak bodies, humans would not be able to withstand such cold. While the humans felt fine even in such harsh weather conditions. The Spirit King was incredibly angry, because not only had they survived the storm, they were also happy. Orcs were happy that they had a training in particularly harsh conditions. It turned out that the demons had a resistance to cold, because all who did not have it long ago died out. The spirit did not understand how weak people are able to possess such powerful mana. The spirit watched the people and realized that it would be impossible to get rid of all the people at once. For this reason the spirit decided to simply destroy the leader of the people, namely Lloyd. The spirit went to the cave where the protagonist was supposedly located. Then with all his might he began to shout. The ground began to shake. The protagonist began to come out of the cave. He was incredibly angry, while the queen showed no emotion on her face. The spirit hated Lloyd and was going to cut him with his wind blade. A terrible wind fell on the protagonist. Then he and the queen decided that their opponent was definitely not a mage and not a dragon. The queen started talking about how only one creature can do that, and Lloyd smiled instantly and made a crazy face thinking that their enemy was just a spirit. The spirit was surprised that Lloyd had figured it out so quickly, but he was sure that the guy couldn't do anything to him. It turned out that no power could harm the spirit, as suddenly Lloyd began his demonic chanting, which could not even be described in words. The queen instantly fell to the ground, and the spirit began to writhing in pain in the sky. The queen seemed to be injured. She definitely lost her battle spirit. While the spirit became visible, the queen looked in its direction, still shaking from the protagonist's voice, and the spirit just fell to the ground, unable to do anything after such a powerful mental attack. Lloyd asked if the spirit was the one who was interfering with his work in this place. The spirit didn't understand what kind of magic Lloyd had just used, because spirits are mana itself and nothing should harm it. The protagonist began to say that he had just spoiled the spirit's mood. Lloyd asked why the spirit was interfering with his work, what his problem was, while the spirit was amazed that the man didn't understand. The spirit started yelling about how humans were just destroying nature and that he would not let them destroy the mountain range. Lloyd instantly attacked the crazy spirit with his shovel, and then the spirit just started flying away laughing at the protagonist. He started saying that Lloyd was not strong enough to hurt him. Suddenly Lloyd started to get a full lungful of air, which caused the spirit to panic, because he already realized what was about to happen. The queen instantly stopped the protagonist. The queen started yelling that Lloyd should think of others when he was using that infernal chant from the underworld itself. Lloyd looked at the queen and tears started to form in his eyes. The queen felt bad for hitting him and wanted to apologize, while the spirit started shouting that the jokes were over and was preparing to attack. The mountain started to emit a huge amount of energy, and then all this energy started to move towards the spirit, who started shouting that he was the mountains and the mountains were him. While Lloyd and the queen were just listening to this nonsense, the spirit king appeared in front of them in a completely different form, saying that he had to kill these people. The spirit looked at the men, saying that now their lives would come to an end. While Lloyd said that the spirit was in trouble, the spirit didn't understand what the man meant. While Lloyd mockingly confessed that anyone who threatens him faces a worse threat, the spirit didn't know what the man was talking about. While behind him something was approaching at breakneck speed, it turned out to be Xavier, who was ready to strike incredibly hard. Then, a moment later, the spirit received a very strong attack right on his face. Lloyd started laughing out loud at the spirit. Then Lloyd started screaming about how nature had just as easily bowed down to the man. Lloyd continued to laugh insanely while the queen looked in his direction. She didn't understand how she could get out such a crazy man, assuming she had just lost her mind. Xavier hit the spirit king in the face with great force. The spirit didn't understand how this was possible, because no matter how strong the mana was, it shouldn't be able to do any damage to him. Looking at Xavier, he realized that the guy was a supreme master who had an incredible level of strength. While Xavier wasn't about to stop and prepared for his next attack, the Spirit King missed his head again and screamed in pain. The enemy began hysterically trying to get away from Xavier's continuous blows, which seemed to have no intention of stopping. The spirit begged Xavier to stop while Lloyd watched silently from the sidelines. The spirit was apologizing and begging Xavier to stop, while covering himself from a huge number of punches. Xavier finally stopped and looked intently at the spirit he had been beating only moments before. The spirit was begging Xavier to stop, because it had lost almost all of its mana from the blows, and if it continued like this, it might disappear. As Xavier began to draw his sword from its sheath and then began to draw the blade of the sword, and after a moment he let it go, causing the ghost to receive another blow from Xavier, who a moment later drew the blade of the sword again, with the same crazed look on his face, and then made another attack with the blade. Lloyd stopped his subordinate, saying that you can't treat someone who can't even fight back like that. Lloyd said that violence does not solve anything. The queen thought that in their case one strong blow could solve everything. While Lloyd sent Xavier away and started to respectfully lift the poor spirit, Xavier tried to attack again and Lloyd defended the spirit, saying that the guy should stop, it was too violent. The queen began to suspect that Lloyd and Xavier were working on a plan. While the spirit began to thank the protagonist profusely for saving it, Lloyd was incredibly happy with the result he had just achieved and looked admiringly at Xavier, who was also very happy that they had managed to subdue the spirit. The queen, who had been watching the whole thing, sincerely began to believe that the boys were a real band of bandits. Lloyd invited the spirit to talk to him and again asked why he was interfering with the construction. The spirit tearfully confessed that he just couldn't bear to watch the nature of his mountain range being destroyed. Lloyd asked the spirit if he would mind if they improved the nature of the place during the construction. Such words struck the queen. She had not expected to hear something like that from Lloyd. The spirit began to say that under such conditions he would not mind, but also wanted to add that people do not usually do that. Lloyd confessed that the spirit was right, for while other animals adapt to nature, humans change nature to suit themselves. Lloyd also began to say that having the power to destroy nature, they should improve and protect it. The queen watched as Lloyd promised to make this mountain range even more beautiful. The queen didn't understand why they should take care of nature when they had already subdued this spirit. Lloyd asked if the spirit could make the climate of this place warmer, for then it would be much easier for them to work. The spirit, with a delighted look on its face, began to say that it could do so, as long as it did not harm nature. While the queen still couldn't fully understand Lloyd, she looked at the protagonist thinking that he intrigued her. The first step in the construction was to punch a hole in the gorge and widen it. Later, they began to create a solid track in order to install the railroad. Also, the second stage was to create a system of switching railroad tracks, but thanks to the engineers this stage was over quickly. The third stage was the construction of the train, and it was also not a problem because Lloyd did such a thing in hell. The demon girl began to talk about the fact that demons are willing to work for food, because to earn food is the most sacred thing. The demons worked very hard and ate very little, which was just fine with Lloyd. The fourth step was that they were busy with plants, creating beautiful species which demons are also good at. Suddenly Lloyd's heart began to ache again, and he clutched his chest. The queen was worried about the protagonist, because the construction was taking a long time, and she thought they should hurry up. Lloyd began to say that they could not do that, and then with a tired look said that nature must be preserved. The queen did not understand why Lloyd would sacrifice himself for such a thing, as he might die, but he explained that if he didn't, he would regret it in the end. Lloyd made a mad face and then said that if the nature of the place made it popular with tourists, he could make a fortune by setting up a hotel here. The queen instantly lost the glare in her eyes. It was all Lloyd, as always, in his repertoire. The queen was surprised that the guy was spending her money to make money for himself. Lloyd instantly fell to his knees and started talking about how the benefit to the kingdom was much greater and that he only needed a small building. The queen began to smile while Lloyd watched her reaction carefully, and then the queen said that Lloyd should strive for more, because his greed benefits many. Lloyd was overjoyed, for he had the opportunity to create a business that would bring him pocket money. For now all his money went to maintaining his territory. At that time the train was completely ready, and the demons moved it with the help of the mechanism. The train moved along the tracks while Lloyd ordered a lever to be switched, pointing to the railroad. A moment later the railroad tracks began to change, and then the train went in the direction they wanted. Such a thing caused only delight in the children of demons, because they could see such a thing for the first time in their lives, while the spirit also with a smile on his face watched what this place could turn into. The guys on the train saw the incredible views that appeared before their eyes, as Lloyd suddenly received a new skill for the achievement, namely the ability to jump over any obstacle, which caused a complete misunderstanding of Lloyd, because he is already a master of the sword, and such a skill he does not need. At that time, the time dome that had been standing over the mountain evaporated a moment later, allowing time to run its course. At the same moment Lloyd immediately felt a terrible pain in his heart. The guy continued to sit and did not give any signs of pain, and a moment later he began to fall, but at the last moment the queen managed to pick up the exhausted Lloyd, and then she swore an oath in her ear, namely that she will definitely protect the protagonist and he should not worry. At that time the dragon hovered over the train, after which the queen said that it was time for them to leave to save the royal decree. Some time later a very bright sun rose over the palace. At the same time Lloyd was finally able to open his eyes. Then he instantly noticed the hand that was pouring its mana into him. It turned out to be the queen, who didn't seem at all surprised that the guy had regained consciousness. Lloyd tried to get up and apologize for his rudeness, while the girl said that a sick person should stay in bed. The queen asked Lloyd to hurry up and put on formal clothes, for she was about to start the ceremony of handing over the Eye of Summer, which appealed to Lloyd with absolutely no emotion at all. A while later the Queen started to announce to a large number of people that thanks to Lloyd they got the trade route. Then she started to shout that now their kingdom is the center of trade of the whole world, and they were able to get the power of a great nation without a fight. Then the girl looked towards Lloyd, who felt just awful, while the Queen talked about giving the Eye of Summer to the hero as a reward. The Queen was very worried about Lloyd because his condition was getting worse by the second, but she just can't ignore the official procedure. After that the wizards brought the artifact itself while Lloyd's heart was getting worse by the second. His eyes were completely empty and his body was shaking. Suddenly the heart of the protagonist stopped. After that the artifact of the Heart of Winter began to force the heart of the hero to beat, because at this rate he would just die. The nobleman began an incredibly long speech that they begin the ritual of transferring the artifact, while the hero completely lost control over his body. It seemed from minute to minute he would simply die. The emptiness more and more absorbed his heart and soul, and after a moment his head began to fall, and then the body itself began to fall to the ground because Lloyd lost his life. While the Queen instantly drew her blade and then screamed with all her might, while Xavier instantly flew into the air from the crowd of people, after which the Queen instantly swung towards the box containing the artifact. This caused a complete misunderstanding from the nobleman who could not understand what she was trying to do, while the Queen instantly shattered the box with the artifact with an incredibly fast strike of her sword. This caused a complete shock in the eyes of the people, as they could not understand what was happening, while the artifact became visible to all the people who were in the place. The artifact began to emit a tremendous amount of light. The artifact seemed to emit incredible flames, while Xavier was instantly near the artifact, seemingly a second before the explosion was about to occur. Xavier then covered himself along with the unstable artifact with a shield of mana. Xavier's body began to be covered in burns due to the temperature this incredible artifact was emitting. The Queen who was running towards Lloyd pondered how she could do something so reckless for just one person. But trying to lift Lloyd, she truly believed that this guy could solve any problem that might arise. The Queen started to give her mana with the firm intention to give Lloyd all of it without worrying about her life. Suddenly Lloyd was able to open his eyes. Then he instantly used his fast charging ability and his hand started to absorb a huge amount of mana. Lloyd then pointed his hand towards the artifact, and a moment later the artifact burst out of Xavier's shield, and at a great speed headed towards Lloyd, who was lying on the ground preparing to absorb the artifact. A moment later the artifact instantly began to flow into the hand of the protagonist, causing a strong wave, after which everything went back to normal and all the people were safe again. They did not understand what had just happened, while Xavier, who had incredible power, was lying on the ground, as well as the Queen and Lloyd were also lying on the ground. The Eye of Summer began to absorb and the Heart of Winter saw an incredibly bright light. Then it seemed the light began to come closer and closer to the heart. The Eye of Summer looked at the other artifact with love in its eyes, while the heart was looking at the Eye of Summer with the same rapturous look. Then they embraced each other, which caused the harmony between cold and warmth to begin to create. Eventually it created a powerful hurricane that combined these two opposing qualities. Then it began to merge together, creating a bright sphere. After that the heart of the protagonist instantly returned to normal and the cold finally receded. After that Lloyd was able to open his eyes again. Lloyd suddenly received a completely new ability, namely the baptism of the Demon King, which he could give once a day, and which also only lasted for 24 hours. After that Lloyd mentally wondered what effect the baptism gives, and it turned out that it gives true effectiveness. The system explained by example that if you give the baptism to Xavier, he will instantly become the highest master from a high entry-level master, which is the same as the baptism of a demon king. Lloyd was shocked at the information he had just learned. Then a smile instantly appeared on his face. Lloyd started to rise to his feet, under the Queen's gaze. The guy landed flat on his feet, after which he immediately addressed the people of the kingdom saying that this was an incredible performance that had been invented by the Queen herself for them. Lloyd said in a loud voice that now everyone will know that their kingdom will soon become the richest country in the world. He also gesticulated incredibly and began to say that even if they were to be attacked by dragons, they could easily hold them off. Such a speech caused an instant reaction of all the people. They were incredibly proud and happy for their kingdom, while the Queen and Xavier just smiled silently looking at the protagonist, who after a moment began to turn around to them, and with a wide smile and a glint in his eyes looked at them. Thanks a lot to everyone who watched this video to the end. Really thanks guys. New videos will start to come out in about a month because unfortunately the chapters are over, I myself am interested in how the plot will develop further, but as you understand we'll have to wait, as well as all the important information I will publish in the tab community. But for now I'll say goodbye to you, see you soon.